Just over 7 years ago today, I posted my first video on YouTube with nothing but a hope and a dream. That was on this game, Planetside 2. And so I thought it fitting to turn back the clock and revisit this old dog, see how she's doing. And I was surprised to find that there's still a community behind it, and it's still a lot of fun. Hey guys, in case you didn't know, I'm Morphologist. And in this video, I'm going to tell you how my journey was back to Araxis, what's changed and what's the same, and by the end, you'll know whether or not you want to hop back in. So, let's get started. The original draw to Planetside 2 was always the scale of battles that you could experience in the game. 50 versus 50, 100 versus 100, and tanks, planes, and infantry battles, both inside and outside, underground, and all this in a platoon with your friends all on VoIP. And this was, again, like 7 years ago. Now, today, there really isn't anything else on the market that still can match the amount of players you can get in a given battle, and I guess that's kind of sad. But that's also one of the most refreshing things to come back to in Planetside, is to go back to experience these massive player versus player battles and just see how awesome and epic they could be, even with the now somewhat poorly aged graphics. The game's still a free-to-play experience, however, the original company that owned it, Sony, since split off from its development group, which is now called Daybreak Games. They've continued to produce the game till today, adding more things such as weapons, vehicles, continents, and even functionality to the experience. One of the cooler functionalities that they added in recently was base building, which enables you to create your own outpost anywhere on the map. This also unlocks special abilities such as orbital bombardment, which can help clear, say, a completely overrun base of all enemies at nearly once. This isn't easy though, because the enemy is going to be fighting you all along the way, trying to stop you from completing that base and launching said orbital bombardment. But I understand that you may be a little bit hazy on how the game's played. To quickly refresh your memory, the game is played on continents, and there are 3 factions per continent. You've got the Vanu, the NC, and the TR. They each have their own backstories, which are not terribly important for this particular explanation. What you need to know here is that the way the game is played is that you take over parts of the map until you control a majority. If you control the majority within the time limit, you will control that continent and your faction will get a bonus for the next continent. Now this is a new way of playing the game. Back when I played, all the continents were open and only one would be locked at a time. They also added a completely new continent called Hosin, which is a bog-like area of Araxis. Now this area of the map is more focused on infantry battles with some vehicle battles interstitched in between. That's because it's got a very heavy canopy that covers most of the map, making air support quite difficult. But for those of you who do actually like playing as infantry quite a lot in Planetside 2 or in games in general, this would be one of the continents you might enjoy most. It's not the shiniest or the prettiest, but it's definitely a place where you can get up close and personal as, say, an infiltrator without the enemy ever finding out. One particular issue I recall when I played Planetside 2 way back then was the balance of teams. Sometimes certain factions would have way more players on them at a certain time than others, making the fights somewhat unfun. Well, they recently introduced a new faction called the NS Operatives, which is a faction that will basically fill in the gaps between the factions, making sure that it's a more even playing field for those who are in the least populated faction. Playing as NS Operatives actually comes with their perks. You start with all new NS weapons, including some weapons that are particularly unique to the NS Operative faction. These are actually pretty darn good just in their stock fashion, and I found myself having fun right off the bat without having to worry too much about upgrading my stuff through earning certs. That being said, I found myself earning a lot more certs a lot more quickly than I remembered in the past, even without any sort of premium membership. So I think this is a really good change to the game because I always found it a bit of a grind to try to get new stuff for my weapons. By the way, in case you didn't know, that's how you earn and build your weapons up in this game. You basically grind and take out like certain areas of the map, and you'll earn things called certs that you can use to either buy new weapons or to buy upgrades for the weapons that you already have. Getting in fights to earn those certs faster, though, has never been easier. One of the things I pleasantly discovered when I logged back in was the fact that it dropped me in a platoon automatically. That, and it also gave me the option to join straight into combat through a drop pod without even a beacon being deployed, which is how traditionally you would be able to get onto one of these really hot zones. And that's a really great thing to experience, because one of the other big problems I remember with Planetside 2 way back in the day was that even though there were a lot more players than there are today, getting into a battle was pretty difficult. There'd be a lot of setup, a lot of trying to get the platoon together, trying to find where the next battle was and get over there to actually start fighting. Nowadays, it's pretty simple and easy to get into it. They've even changed the way that you spawn at different locations. Originally, you'd have to wait to be able to spawn up a lattice or up a line of spawn points before you could get to the one you wanted to. Now you can spawn straight over there right away without any wait. Again, this is bringing down that wait time so that you can always hop back into the action with very little downtime in between, if that's what you prefer. If you're lucky to be dropped into a platoon that's really organized, you might find yourself in epic coordinated battles with people in tanks or planes or just ground assaults that can make the experience way better than anything you could find just on your own. That being said, give yourself a break if you don't live the first time you drop back in, because it will take you a little bit of time to get used to things and the controls, as you can see here. Aside from the controls, I also had to get used to the changes that they've made to the classes. Now, mostly they're the same. You still have infiltrators, heavy assaults, light assaults, medics, and a super heavy assault suit thing. But now they've added a bit more balance to these different roles so that, say, the light assault now has the ability to take out vehicles right off the bat without having to wait to upgrade to the very expensive C4 bricks, which, by the way, it can still upgrade to. All of these new features and abilities are only added to by the performance experience that I had playing Planetside 2 again. Back when I played, 3-4 years ago, my rig wasn't really up to the task. Few rigs were, actually. The game was pretty taxing because of how many players were on a map at a given time. Not so today. If you've upgraded your rig sometime in the past few years, you're going to run this like a dream. You're going to get max FPS no matter what sort of screen you have. 240 Hz? Sure, you're going to get 240 FPS, and that makes the experience very crisp and clean. And so if you can get over the older looking graphics and immerse yourself in the experience, it can be a lot of fun, and you know what? It still has its beautiful moments. It isn't with its downsides though. Planetside 2 isn't perfect. It's an old game. It was made 7 years ago and the graphics definitely reflect that. They have made upgrades to DirectX 11, changed the textures, and even improved a lot of the lighting, but still, it shows its age. Newer games are going to look a lot better than this, but unfortunately, I would argue that a lot of new games don't play like this, and so for me, I actually am enjoying this way more than a lot of the newer shooters that I've played recently. So if you're willing to overlook the dated graphics for solid, polished gameplay mechanics, I think Planetside 2 might be worth a try. I mean, hey, it's free. But now I think I should at least address the elephant in the room, which many of you probably have already pointed out in the comments section below, and that's, this game is free to play, but it has microtransactions. Now for many, this is going to be a big turnoff, and I can understand that, especially considering the recent microtransaction fiasco with loot boxes, and the way that Activision has been making them more of a pay-to-win feature as opposed to just pay for visual upgrades. Now this was a game that was made well before this massive trend, and so its microtransactions really aren't necessarily going to benefit you hugely. Yes, they're going to increase your experience earned, and if you do pay some money, you'll be able to upgrade your weapons a lot faster, but they're more side grades than anything else, and this has always been true since the beginning when they were first introduced as a payment method. Honestly, I didn't notice or care that I didn't have it when I started playing for the first 2 or 3 hours. I only ended up getting it because I wanted to try the NS faction for this video, which is probably the biggest downside to the game right now, is that you can't try out that new faction unless you have a premium membership, which is about $15 a month. 7 years on, I can say I am incredibly impressed that Planetside 2 still remains to be a solid experience that you can find nowhere else on the internet. Yeah, it might have microtransactions, and yeah, the engine's a little dated, but still, where can you fight battles like this? There really isn't another game out there right now, and I'm really excited to see what they come up with in the future with their announced Planetside 3. While I don't plan to make this a mainstay of my channel like it once was in the past, I am certainly going to be revisiting it every so often as we move forward, especially when Planetside 3 is released. But I hope you guys found this video informative And if you want to try it out, you really should go down to the description below and click on that link. It is free, like I said, guys, so what do you got to lose? Check it out. See if you like it. If you don't, uninstall it. No worries. Thanks again, guys, for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.
Guys, all the armor, please, right now, on this hill. 2 point.